Hi, Donald Gordon. We're at Crofthead, which is a farm 15 k's south of Milton, 236 hectares that we purchased in 1977. Joan and myself, and we've brought up 3 children here. When we came here, we had 50% equity in the land and no equity in the stock and plant, so we were pretty lucky to get in here. 4 years out, I was always keen on forestry, but I couldn't afford to start planting till 4 years after we got here, which I regret now. But we started planting in 1981, and in the following years we've built up to just on 40 hectares of trees, probably about 80% radiata, and macrocarpa and Douglas fir make up the balance, with a wee block of chestnuts we've planted just for a variety. We've probably also planted about 2.5 kilometres of shelter belt, because it probably lies to the south, as you could probably see in the photo, and it's very exposed. We've done most of the work ourselves on this property, myself and the kids as they've been growing up, and they're all off our hands now, but they are still living locally. We originally carried over 2,000 ewes in replacement. For the last few years I've semi-retired, and we've leased half the farm. You'll probably see some of the neighbours who is leasing the property, their heifers in the background. They are leasing 90 hectares, and we've retained the gullies, and I still run 1,000 ewes on the lower part of the property. About 4 years ago we started logging, and we had some I was quite keen on agroforestry for a start, to try and retain the grazing in the gullies. In hindsight, it hasn't been as good as what it was supposed to be, but it still did enable us to start logging trees at 28 years of age. And in the last 4 years we've probably logged about 13 hectares, and the last lot netted just over $21,000 to us, which was very good and enabled us to carry on our life. And Joan and I are now semi-retired. With the stock here, we first came here, we were only getting 100% lambing, and in the last 4 years we've been between 150 and 160. Even we had the bad snow here 2 or 3 years ago, we still only dropped to the high 140s, so, and that was the shelter. The woodlots give us shelter as well as now they're giving us income. Sure, you have to wait 28, 30 years, but it's, you know, until you start putting them in the ground, you can never get a return. Another thing, if anyone is going to plant trees, be aware of where you plant them, and if it is in an inaccessible place, plant a reasonable area, because getting trees out is not as simple. We've been fortunate. The property's a long, narrow property with a creek running up the south boundary and a road running 1.5 k's up the north boundary, up the top of the ridge, and we've logged, as I said, 14 hectares, and I won't have spent $1,000 on roading, which has been quite, you know, admittedly we've managed to do it in the summer, and because it can get very wet here, got clay soils, and the logging trucks are not small things, and that's something you've got to think about when you are planting, because it comes around quicker than you think. We have got one joint venture on this property with our oldest daughter, who is married with 2 children, and in the 1990s, worrying about when we bought the farm, I hoped it to be a family farm, but as you know, farming through the 80s and 90s was not that good for sheep and beef farmers, and I always wondered whether we'd ever be able to pass on the farm. So we bought another block of land, and we've planted it out in a complete forest, and on that block our 3 children all have a 10 hectare block in a joint venture with Joan and us. I've been involved for the farm forestry for quite a few years. In fact, I've been on the local committee for 36 years. We've always valued the farm forestry. We formed a discussion group, and that was through John, and that was probably about 12 years ago, and it's what we call the Milton Lawrence group. There is about 3 or 4 of these groups in South Otago, and I think when you look around you can see the results of what that's done for farmers in this area, and I advise anyone in any area, if they're going to get into forestry, if they could join a local discussion group. What we do is we only meet once every 2 years, and consequently we have 5 meetings a year over the winter months, and we find that works well, and you get around everyone's place, as I say, every second year. For a young farmer that's just taking over a farm, which is pretty hard to do nowadays with the value of the land and that, but if you can, and if you've got some rough land, as long as you've got to do your land prep first, but to me it's to try and plan ahead, and you know, it would be good if that first 2 or 3 blocks could be at least 3.5 to 10 hectares. There is a cost there, but at least at the end of the day, when you start logging, if you're young now and you're going to have a reasonable return in 30 years time. There is the ETS, which we've registered for. A lot of people are saying it's going to be the godsend of forestry, but there is a potential return there, especially if you're planting new land, as long as it's eligible for the ETS. Well, there's two main reasons we planted forestry. One was for financial return and the other was for shelter, because it's an exposed property. And we found, even when things were tough, if you could tell the bank what area of trees you had and if they were pruned, they did look on them favourably, and you could get through those harder years much easier if they knew you had an asset there that was going to return something in the future. And another thing, when we started logging in 2008, we only did that logging then because prices sort of picked up, and they were only 28-year-old. We could have left them, but we're at our stage of life, we wanted some return out of our endeavour. And we continue to log, as I said before, over the next 3 or 4 years. And the last year we're logging, only last year, we had another block we could have logged, but things looked quite good for what the return we'd had from what we'd done, so we didn't log that block because it got too wet. And that's why I said before that, up till now we've only had to spend under $1,000 putting 4 loads of gravel in one gateway to log 14 hectares of trees. And it's enabled us to, you can leave them standing and they're still going to grow bigger and give you a better return in the years. But that is one of the problems with forestry. The markets are, they can be up and down a bit, exchange rate effects and all those sort of things. And if it's not desirable to sell them, you can just leave them growing. Forestry's been a big part of our life, as you can probably understand, and we've had a lot out of it, and it's certainly provided us for an opportunity to, as I say, retire and move on to other things, or semi-retire, I suppose. And for a young fellow planting nowadays, the options are there. The skills to get the trees established are far more easier, and joining the Farm Forestry Association, that's something you're really going to pick up with their field days. We'll show you what to do, and there is other species, and you can get into shelter, and a lot of places in South Otago do need shelter, or in Otago and Southland. And with the weather we can get in lambing time, and we've really seen the benefits of stock health from shelter, and not only in the winter, for shade in the summer as well. The summers are getting warmer. Species, we've planted mainly radiata. There is other species, macrocarpa, more high value, don't have to be treated, and they grow in South Otago or Otago and Southland very well. We have a wee block of ukes, but I haven't really got into ukes, but those are the major species. Douglas fir, if you're in any higher country, you've got any snow problems over 800 1,000 feet, I would recommend a young fella to think of Douglas fir as a good long-term species, and they are not so intensive. You don't have to prune them, you just have to make sure you get your thinning done on time, because there is a cost, but as we've found out, there's certainly a return at the end of the rainbow.